You know, for decades, the United States and Iran have been locked in this cycle of confrontation. It's a story of deep mistrust that has pretty much shaped the modern Middle East. So in this explainer, we're going to break down the anatomy of this crisis, all the way from its historical roots to a super high-stakes standoff that could be just around the corner.
Okay, I want you to picture this. It's January 2026. The entire world is holding its breath as tensions between Washington and Tehran are just about to boil over. And look, this isn't some sci-fi movie plot. It's a very real potential future based on expert analysis of just how close these two nations are to the brink. Right, and this isn't just a simple showdown between two countries. The conflict pulls in Iran and its whole network of regional proxies. We're talking groups like Hezbollah, the Houthis, and Kataib Hezbollah. But the key takeaway here? Look at the status, ongoing. This isn't some theoretical problem for the future. It's a live, active crisis. To back all this up, the U.S. has made a massive show of force. We're talking 2 full aircraft carrier strike groups sent to the region. I mean, to put that into perspective for you, that is a level of military power we haven't really seen since the run-up to the 2003 invasion of Iraq. It is an unmistakable signal.
And it's not just about the hardware, right? The language is getting heated too, with threats of a massive armada being sent to the Gulf. Look, words like that do more than just raise the temperature. They shrink the room for any kind of diplomacy and make a miscalculation dangerously, dangerously easy.
Okay, so you have to ask, how on earth did it get to this point? A huge military buildup, threats of all-out war? This stuff doesn't just happen overnight. To really get what's happening in this 2026 crisis, we've got to go back, way back.
Well, it really all boils down to a long, long history of mistrust. It's the story of how the US and Iran went from being pretty close partners to, well, sworn enemies.
Yeah, this timeline really shows you the wild swings in this relationship. It all starts in 1953 with a CIA-backed coup that creates this deep, lasting resentment in Iran. But then, get this, just 4 years later, the US actually helps Iran start its nuclear program. The real turning point, though, is 1979. The Iranian Revolution and the hostage crisis completely shatter the alliance. And then, fast forward to 2002, after 9/11, and the axis of evil speech basically cements Iran's position as an adversary in the American mind.
I mean, the change is it's night and day. Before 1979, Iran was a cornerstone of U.S. policy in the Middle East. They were even working together on nuclear technology. After the revolution, a total 180. The relationship becomes defined by pure hostility, no diplomatic ties, and the U.S. labeling Iran a state sponsor of terrorism. You're talking about one of the most incredible geopolitical reversals of the entire 20th century. So with all this bad blood, all this mistrust, both sides tried to avoid fighting each other head-on. Instead, the fight moved into the shadows, and that gave rise to the modern battlefield of the proxy war era. So what are we even talking about when we say proxy war? Well, think of it like this. It's when two big powers want to fight, but they don't want to get their own hands dirty. So they use other groups, third parties, as substitutes. It lets them project power and do some damage, all while being able to say, hey, it wasn't us.
And this is what that proxy network actually looks like on the map. From Hezbollah up in Lebanon to the Houthis down in Yemen, these groups let Iran project its power all across the Middle East. These groups aren't just friends of Iran. They are the main tools Iran uses to challenge the US and its allies without having to do it directly.
Okay, so things really got supercharged back in 2018. The US pulled out of that big 2015 nuclear deal, the JCPOA. Then, it slapped on a campaign of maximum pressure. These were crippling economic sanctions designed to force Iran to come back and negotiate a much, much tougher deal. And all of that, it brings us right back to where we started. We're back at the fictional standoff in 2026, but now hopefully with a much better understanding of all the history and all the forces at play. So what's the final straw in this 2026 scenario? What kicks it all off? Interestingly, it's not the nuclear program directly. It's actually widespread protests inside Iran that start in late 2025. The government cracks down hard. That leads to an international outcry, and that's what finally triggers a direct response from the US.
So in the middle of this crisis, the US basically puts its cards on the table. And this list goes way beyond just the protests. It's a laundry list of Washington's biggest issues with Iran. Stop all nuclear work, hand over your enriched uranium, stop building ballistic missiles, and cut off your proxy network. You gotta understand, for Iran, this isn't just a list of demands. This is a list that targets the very core of their entire national security strategy.
And
as you can imagine, the rest of the world is starting to get really nervous. French officials put out this stark warning, and it captures a fear a lot of people have. A war between the US and Iran wouldn't stay contained. They're terrified that it would spiral into a massive regional catastrophe, especially with the horrifying thought of military strikes on nuclear facilities.
So how does Iran respond to all this pressure? Well, it's kind of two-sided, really. Publicly, they're using all this fiery language, saying their fingers are on the trigger. But behind the scenes, there's a different story. They're involved in these back-channel talks, often with Oman as the middleman, trying to find a way out diplomatically. It's a classic playbook, right? Show your teeth, but also leave the door open for a deal.
And that brings us to the biggest question of all, the one that defines this whole crisis. Which way do they go? Is it going to be war, or is it going to be diplomacy?
And honestly, the two paths forward could not be more different. Path 1 is total war. And we're not talking about a quick, clean war. We're talking a long, brutal, grinding conflict of attrition that could tear the whole region apart for years. Path 2 is a fragile peace. It would be difficult, it would be painstakingly negotiated, and it would probably focus on the nuclear issue. Neither path is easy, but my goodness, the consequences are worlds apart.
And there's this really chilling Iranian proverb that might give us a clue into Tehran's thinking. Death once, wail once. The meaning is pretty unsettling. Basically, it means it's better to face a quick, painful death than to die a slow, agonizing one from 1,000 cuts. It's this idea of, let's just get it over with, no matter how bad it is.
And so all of this leaves us with one final, really haunting question. After more than 40 years of pure hostility, after all the coups and revolutions and sanctions and proxy wars, is there just too much bad blood here? Is another conflict basically inevitable at this point? Or can diplomacy, as fragile as it is, finally break the cycle? That is the unanswered question at the very heart of the US-Iran crisis.